Good morning, Birmingham. Happy Father's Day. Whether you guys are joining us online or if you're in the room with us, we're going to have a really fun day. So we're going to get started here in just about 2 minutes. So see you soon.
Good morning. On behalf of all of us here at Kensington Church, welcome. We are so glad that you're here with us this morning, whether in person or online. I'm Sam Frangione, Associate Director of Student Ministries at our Lake Orion campus. And happy Father's Day to all of you dads out there. How are we celebrating today? Are we barbecuing, going to some buffets, playing a little golf, maybe a little nap on the hammock? My wife and I have 2 children, Nora and Luca. Nora is 3.5 and Luca is just 3 months old. So we are right in the thick of it. Fatherhood for me has been a crazy time, but a time I know that where I've learned a little bit more about how God sees us. Thinking of how my 3.5-year-old, when she really wants to spend time with me, she actually might choose me over my wife. It happens, not super often, but it does. And when she chooses to spend time with me, I just get a glimpse of what it looks like. I think of how God feels of when we choose to spend time with Him. Now, speaking of kids, there is an awesome group of kids called Kaleo Kids. This musical theater program focuses on the arts as well as character-building values like empathy and excellence. In a typical year, Kaleo is an incredible outreach to students from our partner schools. We just completed our spring session and had our first in-person performance since December of 2019. This excitement is firsthand for me because I actually was our Orion campus music teacher this spring. So I got to spend time with our kindergartners through 5th graders, teaching them about music, but also about what it looked like to speak life in their lives. So we have another opportunity coming this summer, Kaleo's Spark Camp. This week-long day camp focuses on music and being loved by Jesus. Students learn and sing worship songs written by other kids. They rotate through classes in music, dance, and drama, and have a guest artist workshop each day from a local talented artist or musician. This is a summer experience that your child does not want to miss. You can find out more and register at kensingtonchurch.org/Kaleo. Another thing that involves our kids, maybe you've heard that we're looking for volunteers in our children's programming for the summer. We aren't choosy. You don't have to be an expert in children or the Bible. I just want to challenge us men to actively pursue being role models for our children. Let's not be passive. Let's not be so comfortable in our seat that we don't even consider pouring into the next generation. So, men and women, let's take care of the kids in our community. Now, we are in the second week of our summer fashion series, taking a look at the designer label. But before we continue, again, happy Father's Day to all you awesome dads. Being a dad is fun, rewarding, and hard work, but it's also pretty cool experiencing the dad life.
Dad Life 2020, 10 years later, 20 pounds heavier. Back at it again. Check me. Still rocking the docks, tall socks and Crocs. Got some gray in the go, call me Silver Fox.
Got that ornamental turtle, steaks on the Weber. 10 years later, looking better than ever.
I'm a middle-class hustler. When it comes to saving money, I'm a buster. Keep an iron grip on that thermostat. AC. When we leave the house, I'ma crank it up to 80.
I don't spend a dime on those name brands. Spent the last 10 years in the same pants. Got that meal plan, you know I'm saving a bunch. Brown bagging for the fam every day for lunch. Eat up.
Up and working on that Reno, got them paints and stains. Ship lapping like a boss, you can call me Chip Gaines. My window panes thermal treated for efficiency. They'll pay for themselves by 2043.
I turn a honey-do list into honey done. I can flip a half bat in a half day, son. I'm in the zone, I'm on my grind, and I only had to use YouTube 4 times.
Dad life, button down plaid life. What you know about that burger flipping dad life? Telling jokes, Diet Cokes. It ain't a bad life, it's a dad life.
Introducing Young Daddy.
I may be new to the game, but I'm rolling in smooth. Anything is possible. New dad attitude. Crib locked down like it's Fort Knox, baby proof. And you know that food non-GMO. That's the truth. Pass on the Mickey D. Nope. Not gonna give him the mac and cheese. Not gonna give him a sugar drink. I only give him that gluten-free. Yes, indeed. Bye, baby gift card. Yeah, I'm swiping that. Stinky baby booty, no sweat. Yeah, I'm wiping that.
I'm in grandpa mode, yeah, my kids got kids. I'ma spoil those babies every chance I get. Hit the park, then the zoo on my brand new hip. Last stop, Dairy Queen, get that double dip. They call me Peepaw, and that's a fact to me and Meemaw. Going rogue with the snacks. If you didn't want my grandkids eating the sweets, then you should have thought twice before you left them with me.
I got a smartphone, but I don't know how to use it. Text message font size bigger than a Buick. Saw a funny video, I wanna send it to you, but I can't figure out how to get it off the YouTube.
Roll up to the pool, turning heads. I don't even care if I embarrass my kids. Sunbathing, I'm a feast for the senses. Got my glasses on, transitional lenses.
Dad life, no you can't get Chad life. What you know about that burger flipping dad life? Raising teens, birds and bees. It ain't a bad life, it's a dad life. Hot rods, hot dogs, working on my dad bod. Flexing on the beat in my burger flipping big dogs. Taking naps, CPAPs. It ain't a bad life, it's a dad life. It's Dad Life 2020. If you missed the original Dad Life, go to www.youtube.com/watch. The question mark, V, the equal sign, a capital D, a capital O, a capital K, the lowercase u, the capital S, a capital Q, a capital I, a capital J, the lowercase L, lowercase O, and lowercase g. It's easy as that.
I think that ending could have gone on for another 5 minutes, and I still would have been laughing with every single syllable. Well, hey, my name is Justin Warrens, and I want to welcome you. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers in the room. Can we give it up for the dads in the room?
Woo-hoo! Happy Father's Day! My name is Erin, and I am the campus director here, and we are going to stay on a roll. The energy of that video is going in the room, so I've got a dad joke for you. This is in honor of my husband, who's the king of dad jokes. So you guys, I just want you to be really careful when we go outside. I don't trust those trees. They seem really shady. You guys know where I got that joke? You see, they keep all the dad jokes, you know where? In the database.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts. All right, I have one. All right, so here we go. I have the last one. We're going to go with the last one. All right, so I was at an interview and they asked me if I can perform under pressure. I said, no, I don't know if I can do that, but I have a really good Bohemian Rhapsody. Huh?
Bum, 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 ba-da-dum, bum.
See, I feel like with dad jokes, it's like that little bit of energy, but a lot of joy in my soul. All right, so, well, we want to have a little fun. So here's what I want to do. We're going to play a little game, and it might be a little bit dangerous because we're going to throw some stuff. But for this game, this is what I need you to do. If you are with your dad, or you are a dad, or you are willing to admit this for your dad, I need you to either shout or stand up for one of these things, okay? So here's how we're gonna honor our fathers today. I need you to raise your hand or shout if your dad or father still owns a pair of cargo shorts and wears them. Who do I got? Oh, right there. I saw, right there. There you go. There you go, celebration of your dad, Butterfinger.
All right, so we're
king-size candy bars, y'all.
We're gonna stay with the dad joke theme here. If you or your father told a dad joke on the way to church today.
Come on, anyone willing to do one? How about if you are willing to admit you told the dad joke in the last week? All right, there you go.
Oh, you got it.
On vacation, right? Just offering that up. Great. All right, so how about if your dad ask for socks or underwear as their Father's Day gift? How many dads ask for it? I need to see. Come on, somebody out there, dad. All right, there you go. You're just doing it for we're 3 for 3 right now. I just want to admit that. I'm a soccer player.
So, keeping the dad jokes rolling here. No, I'm actually not. I expect this place to get just erupt right now. Who asked to skip church this morning so you could golf?
How many dads asked?
It's okay, no judgment zone. Come on. Oh, they're actually golfing, aren't they? They are on the course.
You got called out. Right there. You're like, no, don't do it. I didn't do it. I just want the candy. All right, how about this? If your dad at some point said, now, wives, I need your help on this. I will never own a minivan, and yet drove that thing and parked it out front. Any dads, or had one even though they didn't want one, I need you to out your dad right now. I have 2 minivans.
Yeah, Justin, you might need to eat that one.
I have 4 children. I need 2 minivans because that's the only way we can get around. All right, I'm keeping this one. This is for me. I'm taking this one home. I got 3 Musketeers.
Let's face it, he earned that big time. All right, guys, so welcome again today. Happy Father's Day. If you are new, we're so excited to have you here. We have something called the Hub over here, and it's just a table where we'll have people after service, whether you're new and want to get connected or you're looking for ways to take next steps. The Hub is where you do that.
Yeah, and the other thing we want to let you know about is as this summer has obviously reopened within culture and there's opportunities for reconnection, not only are we going to create spaces on the weekends here to connect, actually, we're going to talk about a little bit after the service, but also we have the incredible opportunities for your family to engage with others within our community. For those of you that are parents and families, we have Rock Your Family coming up on August 21st. It's a one-day experience for your family to have an intentional day together, experiencing some conversations, some great opportunities for your kids and family opportunities, but also just a great day to get away and have an intentional day away with a purpose. And so we're looking forward to that. We also have something that's very near and dear to our hearts called Hope Water Project, and we're running a 5K in July 31st.
That's right, July 31st, Troy campus.
And it's going to be an incredible opportunity for us to be partnered together for clean water, something that we've been passionate about. These are things you're going to hear more about. So if you have questions about how to stay connected on that, you can stop by the Hub as well. Make sure you get on our email list, or you can join us on Facebook and be a part of our community online.
And then just for today, if we're looking to connect, or if you're looking to connect today, please do. Outside, right after service, we're doing coffee, drinks, and donuts to celebrate all of you dads. So
Awesome.
Please join us out there.
So today we are jumping into what we have called summer fashion. And this idea of summer fashion, we've talked about last week, this idea of clothing ourselves with maybe the character of Christ, the characteristics of Christ, and how that would transform us and our worlds. And we're going to continue that conversation. And one of my favorite writers, his name is Richard Foster, and he wrote this book called Celebration of Discipline. I'm going to talk a little bit about that book today. But one of the things he said in there was, let's not impress people with our clothes, but let's impress them with our lives. And my heart and my hope that today is that we would lean into this moment together. We would lean into the conversation and the scriptures together and go, God, what could you be stirring in our hearts? And so one of the things that we do as a community when we sing is we sing back to God almost as a prayer, almost as a moment of praise, or as a moment of reflection, saying, God, would you speak to me today? So my hope is our band leads us that you would be asking that question. God, would you speak to me today? Help me impress something upon my heart that transforms the way I live my life.
I invite you to stand and sing with us, worship to our Father.
To fulfill the law and prophets, to a virgin
You know, I love that song as it says, in the darkness we are waiting, without hope and without light. Reveal the kingdom coming to reconcile that which is lost. You know, there's something that within me, especially on a day like today, that I think of all the different stories that exist in this room. We're here, one, and we're going to take a moment, and we've been celebrating and laughing about Father's Day, but then also there's this moment where we lean into that which sometimes can feel lost, that which feels distant or disconnected. There's so many different complexities when it comes to relationships. And then when we think about the way in which our world, how we view God the Father, and do we see him as one who, while we are in the darkness, while we are waiting, while we are without light, that he is coming to offer us hope, to offer us love, to offer us grace. See, my hope is that today, in those longings for hope, in those longings for grace, in those longings for a future, in those longings for the meaning of life in the middle of the storms, that we would hear God's voice speak through all the noise and offer us that reconciliation of hope and life. And so wherever you are today, whether you are walking in here with a sense of sadness because of loss, whether you're walking in here with a little bit of celebration and excitement because of the relationships that exist in your home, whether you are wondering if God the Father is truly there with you, my hope is that you would feel God meet you in this moment, that he is longing for that reconciliation of your heart and of your hope. Would you join me in praying? Heavenly Father, we come before you, trusting, leaning in to your voice and asking you to speak, asking you to meet us right here. May the scriptures and the stories that we find around the person of Jesus illuminate your love and hope that we long for, and may it give us vision for the future for all of us. Meet us wherever we are at and offer us your hope and your direction. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, as a dad, one of my favorite things is my children. I have 4 children. At least most of the time, they're my favorite things. I called them things, and I'm just laughing about that in my mind right now. But my 4 children are amazing, and yet they're also difficult. But there are these moments that we have every single day where there's these moments of conversation. So I have 3 daughters, 10, 8, and 5. I'm really stressed about the teenage years. I'm just going to be fully honest, because they will be all teenagers in my house at one point, and then my youngest is JJ, and he's 2 years old. And so it's a lot of fun and a lot of chaos. But in the middle of these moments, I just want to, before I step into this message, there's a moment I had yesterday where I was talking with my daughters about what is this new federal holiday that has just been celebrated, this idea of Juneteenth. And, you know, it's really interesting when you talk with a child and you lean into the moment with them and you ask them about what they feel and what they see. And one of the things my daughter said to me as we were talking about this idea of freedom, this idea of liberation, this idea of hope for a community of people, and us celebrating that, we're both reminded of how Jesus is always about hope. Jesus is always about liberation. Jesus is always about meeting us in the middle of the difficult moments and offering us a vision for the future. And I'm looking at my daughter, and she's asking questions about our past and history. And one of the things she says, you know, sometimes I don't like history. 10-year-old daughter says, sometimes I don't like our history. So I go, okay, so why do we need to learn history? And she answered so simply. She said, so we can learn from it, so that we can grow, so that we can make better choices in the future. And I listened to my 10-year-old daughter processing through this, and I'm reminded that this is who we are as followers of Jesus, that we lean into the difficult moments together, and we move forward because we have a God who has always been about fighting for justice, who's always been about liberation, who's always been about freedom, and he meets us in the middle of our mess. And I just find that in the middle of this is like I'm walking with my children going, what is it that we are called to do? And so I felt like it was a moment to celebrate, a moment to be reminded of, and a moment that I leaned in with my daughter and going, what is it that you know, and how can you in your wisdom lead us as we are all in these moments together? as we are called to love one another, love our neighbors as ourselves. So just one moment, I just wanted to share in the middle of a bedtime conversation that I wrote down and I'll never forget. All right, so we're in this series called Summer Fashion. And while we're having fun with it, I want to talk a little bit about where we were last week real quick for those of you who may not have seen or heard. We looked at Colossians 3, and it says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all the virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity." We talked about when we clothe ourselves with these characteristics, we put to death that which is dividing, and we put on the life that is unifying. And so we challenged just our community last week that maybe there's a characteristics that you find, whether it's, for me, I shared this with my wife, like I can so quickly go to anger or malice or ill will or thoughts in my mind when things are frustrating and I'm tired and I don't know how to navigate a situation, especially with some of my children. I'm like, this is what can stir up inside of me, and I want to put those down and not let that take over, and yet I want to model love and kindness. And when I look at these kind of characteristics, I'm like, this is the life that we long for. So we do this because we believe that God invites us to experience Him and embody those characteristics in our world. So let's talk about putting on clothes for a quick moment. Here's something I've learned over the years as we step into this week 2 of not just putting on physical clothes, but I want to start there. Some of us in this room, when it comes to putting on clothes, we pick our clothes out the day before, and we hang them up, and we're ready to go for the next day, because you know if you make that decision then, you'll be better off the next day. Some of you are like ready to go, so you get out of bed and you're ready, and you jump into the day. Maybe that's some of you. Others of you wait till the morning of, and you may have a spouse that does this, and some of you decide, I'm going to look at my clothes, and I'm going to pick which one fits best based on how I feel. And what sometimes is a 5-second decision might turn into a 5-minute decision, right? And you know which one you are. Or some of you use the very strong and scientific practice of the smell test. It doesn't matter if it's hung up or on the ground. If it smells good, it is good to go. I don't know which one you are. You can out your spouse or family member later, but no matter how we choose our clothes, we all choose them in a way that we hope that gives us confidence to step into our day. Now, have you ever had that moment, though, where you wore the shirt that you thought was going to give you confidence, and you walked into the office, you walked into school, you walked into some place, and somebody else is wearing that exact same shirt? All your confidence is gone, and then you just have who you are. Because we know this tried and true truth, that we don't put on clothes with a side, we don't get to put on our polo and get a side of patience. We don't get to put on our shoes and have interlaced grace. Like when we put on our clothes, we are who we are. See, the reality is the clothes we wear do not change the character we bear. The clothes we wear do not change the character that goes with us into our day. So under the crucible of pressure, we can find ourselves eking out things that we do not desire. So if we talked about last week, put on clothes of this types of characteristics and compassion and these characters of Christ, then how do we do that? How do we move from the clothing that we do not desire to the clothing we do? Well, Jesus stepped into this issue in his day, often, over and over again. He met people in these moments. And this is what he said in Matthew 23. He said, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean." Matthew 23, verses 25 through 26. Jesus is saying it's easy to dress up. It's easy to put on clothes and make yourself look good. This is what the Pharisees, these teachers of the law, would do. But what they were not concerned about was what was on the inside of their hearts, what was on the inside of their souls, and how that was being transformed. He even said this earlier in Matthew. He said, "By the fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or from figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Jesus was pointing out that the way we live our lives has an outward impact, but it's always out of the heart. The heart of the tree, the heart of the person, whatever comes out of us is what we bring into our community, the character that we bring into every moment we step into. And Jesus desires that there would be a work within us, that there would be transformation that exists in our souls, that would change us, transform us, so that we would move into these moments differently. And Jesus used those strong words, these critiques of the royal robes and the things that they wore, their designer clothing that these Pharisees wore, and he gave them a very harsh fashion critique and called them hypocrites. Because they didn't need fashion consultants. What they needed was character consultants. Someone who looked at their very heart and walked with them, catalyzing a change within them. And I love what Richard Foster wrote about this as he was reflecting on one of Leo Tolstoy's perspectives. He said, "Our world is hungry for genuinely changed people." Leo Tolstoy observed this. He said, "Everybody thinks of changing humanity, and nobody thinks of changing himself. Let us be among those who believe that inner transformation of our lives is a goal worthy of our best effort." A goal worthy of our best effort. Not because we stop at inner transformation, but because what happens as our hearts are transformed, we begin to live differently as we go into the world. We begin to love differently as we go into the world. When our hearts are transformed, we begin to move into the moments of our day differently, but it always starts here. The cleaning of the inside of the cup, as Jesus said, the formation of our hearts begin to shape our days, our communities, and our families. And this is why Jesus said this in John 14, as he speaks about who begins to transform us. "All this I have spoken while still with you, but the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you everything I have said to you." This idea, the Holy Spirit as the advocate is called, the Greek word is paraclete. And this word is translated into a few different other terms. It's called the helper, the comforter, the advocate. So the Holy Spirit is not only an advocate, it is a helper, it is a comforter. And that is the one that begins to transform us. And then Jesus would speak about this more and more. He said, "Nevertheless, I tell you the truth." And I love this statement. "It is to your advantage that I go away, for if I do not go away, the helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you." The Holy Spirit, God's presence that goes with us, is for your advantage for transformation, for your advantage to experience comfort, for your advantage to be reminded of truth. Now, what's interesting when you look at some of the Old Testament and the New Testament, one of the thoughts is in the Old Testament, one of the terms that is often used is God is with us. God with us as we go. And especially as you look at the story of the Israelites, God was with them as they went. But yet when you look at the New Testament and you see how Jesus is speaking, and this word paraclete, it moves from God with us to God within us. That God is not saying, "I am not just with you, I am within you, guiding you." He even said this in John 14. He said, "He dwells with you and will be in you." So for those of us who have decided to lean into the voice of God and start recognizing that He offers His presence with us and within us, what happens is He begins to be the guide in which we follow. He begins the guide of our hearts, the guide towards those characteristics of Christ, the guide that allows us to experience compassion, the guide that allows us to experience gentleness, the guide that allows us to grow in our patience and our kindness and our love for one another, our love for all of humanity. That is the guide that leads us. So when He, the Spirit of truth, comes, He will guide you into all the truth. So my question is, we started last week and we said, clothe ourselves, put on these characteristics of Christ. Comes back to how. If the who that is willing to guide us is God's presence and his Spirit, then how does that transformation begin to happen? What's interesting about this Colossians 3, clothe yourselves, ourselves verse about the characteristics of Christ, it's very similar to what another passage out of the book of Galatians, this letter to Galatia, that said this. It's called the fruit of the spirits. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I love this last little line. It says, against such things there is no law. Think about a person that you have met, that you would describe them as living out these fruits of the Spirit, that they have a transformed life in a way where they embody love, joy, peace, kindness, and goodness. Do you hold much against them? Or do you lean in and try to learn from them, try to grow, try to understand what they have and what they have experienced? See, the Spirit of God, God's presence, isn't this distant thing, but it comes in and says our responsibility is to lean into the one that is called the helper, the comforter. And so here's, when we look at this fruit of the Spirit, right before this section is the how. How do we see these fruits come out of our lives? This is what it says. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit which is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with one another, with each other, so that you do not do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. How do we transform? We walk, we're led, and we live in connection with God's presence with us and within us. See, these are all types of ways to communicate a sense of dependence. And really, the question that we have to ask when it comes to what or who is responsible for transformation, the question is, who are we depending on for our transformation? Are we depending on ourselves? Are we depending on God's Spirit to transform us? I believe that dependence is the work of transformation. The question is, who are we following? And dependence is built on who we trust. And if you're like me, this battle that we find, even as I read these scriptures, I'm like, I have a choice to depend on myself, to self-will change and transformation in my life. If I don't know if you've ever said this in your own mind, if I just do better, if I just follow through, if I just get up early enough, and I keep believing that if I just do these things, I'll experience transformation. Or am I depending on God's presence and his direction to lead me in what he wants to transform? When I was thinking about this, I felt like I have to tell a Father's Day story. My dad, something we've gotten into the tradition of over this past, 16 months is we've been sitting around the table talking about life. My children have been asking my dad to tell stories. So he's just been telling these random stories. And we've been laughing because something we have rediscovered in my father is he has more stories to tell than I ever knew. Like we're learning about stories of him getting pied in the face at Bowling Green University when he worked. And we got to go visit Bowling Green just recently for a soccer tournament. He's like, this is the room. My kids are like running around this room going, this is where you got pied in the face. Like we're telling all these stories. But there was this one story that my children have grown to love that I felt like totally connected to this idea of dependence. So my dad was telling the story that my mom, she worked a lot of international business. So she was away overseas. And so my dad was just with me, and he was responsible for taking care of me. And so I don't know for whatever reason why he decided we would go to a mall. He never goes to malls, but for some reason this day, he took me to a mall, and I was about 2.5 to 3 years old. Right? And so he's talking about this whole story. He goes, yeah, so at one point, he just kind of slides it in there. He goes, I lost you. I'm like, oh, for like 2 minutes? For like somewhere between 45 to an hour. I'm like, what? My kids are like, you lost your son for 45 minutes? He goes, well, you were like next to me and then you weren't. I'm like, that's your job, right? Like, this is your responsibility. But here's the thing. I was a kid who just ran around. I didn't care. So I've like reimagined this moment that I'm walking next to my dad, and then all of a sudden, I'm out. I'm going off on my own way. I want to go see what's in this store. I want to go. So my dad walked around for 45 minutes in this small little mall looking for me to see where I was. And then eventually he said he found me, we think. And he was like, I was just really glad. I was like, oh, good. I'm glad that you're glad that you found me, Dad. He goes, I just didn't want to tell your mom. Right? Like this was the moment. But you want to know what's so interesting is that if we take a step back and we look at it, how often, if you think about God is walking with us, asking us to stay close to him. And you've done this as a dad, if you've done this, or if you've babysat, you're like, stay close. And for some reason, children always seem to drop back further and further, and you keep inviting them up. And yet, you want to know what I did as a child? I went off on my own way. I decided I had a better plan. I decided that I knew what was better. And my dependence wasn't on my dad, my dependence was on me, except it was his fault. But don't we do that? We start depending on ourselves. We start building all of the pressure on ourselves for transformation, and we grow frustrated when it doesn't happen on our timing. We don't have the compassion that we actually long for. And all of a sudden, we realize that we have depended on ourselves rather than depending on God. Dependence is the work of transformation. The question is who you are depending on, and how is that dependence shaping your heart? Remember, Jesus said in his invitation to us that the helper would guide us. And my question is who are you allowing to guide you right now? There's something really powerful in this next moment as well. Dependence isn't the only key. It says this in Galatians 6. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. This word sow is really interesting. Now, I don't know if you've been gardening, if you've gotten your garden ready, or if you've ever worked on a garden or you've ever farmed. Sowing is a really important process. Sowing is an important process of building or creating the opportunity for growth to happen. I love what Richard Foster said when it comes to sowing. He said this in his book, Celebration of Discipline. A farmer is helpless to grow grain. All he can do is provide the right conditions for the growing of grain. He cultivates the ground, he plants the seed, he waters the plants, and then the natural forces of the earth take over, and up comes the grain. This is the way it is with spiritual disciplines. They're the way of sowing to the Spirit, the disciplines. And by the way, if you don't know what the term disciplines means, spiritual disciplines are things like prayer, spending time reading the Bible to understand the truth that God speaks to us through that. There may be moments of silence and reflection and listening. There's many other disciplines that we can do. For me, one of my favorites I'll talk about is I love to write, because my mind slows down and I find myself able to process. This is what like these spiritual disciplines allow us to do. And here's what it says. The disciplines are God's way of getting us into the ground. They put us where he can work within us and transform us. By themselves, the spiritual disciplines can do nothing. And this is one of my favorite lines. They can only get us to the place where something can be done. They are God's means of grace. The inner righteousness or transformation we seek is not something that is just poured out on our heads. God has ordained the spiritual disciplines of the spiritual life as a means by which we place ourselves where he can bless us. So we ask, what is our responsibility when it comes to transformation? How do we experience this? I believe this, that our responsibility is to place ourselves in the posture of receiving God's presence. Our responsibility is to place ourselves in the posture of receiving God's presence. See, while dependence is the work of transformation, I believe that the disciplines are the way to transformation, the way in which we hear, the way in which we're reminded of who we are, the way in which when we have wandered away from God the Father and when we are trying to do everything on our own, the moment we place ourselves in God's presence, we begin to experience his hopefulness and his love and his grace. I believe that when we gather together in this place and we sing songs, we don't just sing to sing, we sing songs as reminders of God's grace and his hope. Some of the songs that we sing are reminders of his love that we need that day. Some of the reminders of his love that we long for that day. When we gather together, we are practicing the spiritual discipline of placing ourselves in a posture of receiving whatever God has been speaking to us. And then our responsibility is to respond. If God's nudging us to have the conversation with somebody, if God is nudging us to step into conflict even though we want to avoid it, if God is nudging us to go ask for forgiveness, when we have placed ourselves in that posture, we begin to respond. And I think that's how we grow in the characteristics of compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience and forgiveness and love. It is where God works on our hearts because we have given him something to work with. I want to show you something, but before I do, I want to take a moment and receive our offering. I want to say this, when you are a part of this community and you step in to this next moment financially and you say, I'm in with what is going on here, you are a part of incredible stories. You're a part of stories that are happening here locally where lives are being transformed. People are stepping into small groups. People are stepping into this building for the very first time. People are able to watch from a distance and be able to experience our community together. When you give, you're a part of those stories. But you're not just a part of stories here. You're a part of the stories that are happening in India, the part of the stories that are happening in Nepal, the rescuing of lives physically, spiritually, and emotionally. You are a part of a grand story. And so when I think about that that quote, instead of impressing people with our clothes, impress them with our lives, when you give, I want to say thank you because you are a part of transformation stories every single day. And so when you're visiting or you're new here and you start hearing about those stories, this is what we are about. This is about who we are and what we are so passionate about seeing God do. So there's a couple ways you can give. A lot of that is online in this season. Very simply, the text message option is so easy to be able to step into that. Or on the way out, you can give through our offering buckets. And I just want to say thank you because there are so many stories to tell of what God has been using the resources of this community to do, and we'll continue to do that. All right, I want to show you something. So when it comes to disciplines, I have one real image in my life that has grown because for me, I'm not actually a really disciplined person. When I said earlier about like getting the clothes out the night before, I've only started trying that because I hear it's a good idea. But I don't like doing that. I really don't. And so here's an image. If you know me, I love to kind of bring a prop or something to remind us of what God can and will do. This for me is the image of spiritual disciplines. This is my hammock, and I love my hammock. See if this works. Brooks, I'm not going to ask you to come up on stage today. But here's what I want to tell you about. This hammock, for me, is when I place myself in the presence of God in a moment that is so transformative. See, in this hammock, I'll take my journal, and I'll sit there in the quiet out in the middle of nowhere, because when I connect with God, I love seeing beauty. I love seeing water. I love Michigan. Right? Because I get to see the beauty of all that's around me, and it reminds me of God's faithfulness and goodness. So when I sit in this hammock, I'm reminded of moments. I just had one. You know what I was thinking about, Sydney? I was reminded of NTS camp. I was reminded of students when they would put these hammocks up, and they would sit out in these hammocks as a reminder of God is working on their lives and God is transforming them. I'm reminded that John Somerville, for those of you who know him, he was the youth pastor here as well. And we would, before the beginning of the year, we would take our hammocks out on a camping trip, and we would pray for the year that was to come. We would hang these hammocks 20 feet in the air, because you can't just have a hammock low. When you do that, you have to go 20 feet in the air to really connect with God. You know, we would sit in these hammocks and we would pray. We would write names down on the notebook. I have notebooks filled in this place. There is nothing special about this hammock other than it places me in a posture to receive God's grace. Here's my invitation to you this week. If God has wanted to stir your heart, to transform it, have you placed yourself where you can receive His grace and love? Have you placed yourself in a posture where you can be reminded that when you are wandering, when you are wondering if you're valuable, that you are? I don't know if I'm going to be the person who gets a ton of hammocks purchased this week. I don't care what yours is, but what I care about is that you have a place. And what is that place? That begins to stir your heart. See, for me, when I place myself in the hammock, I'm reminded of all the stories where God has moved and all the stories that I long to see Him continue to do that. I think about you all. I think about how I believe that God is moving in your hearts, that He is transforming us. As we come out of this pandemic, as we are continuing to move together in community, as we are navigating the complexity of what we have just experienced, and our emotions are everywhere, and the opinions are everywhere, when I find myself back in that hammock, I am reminded that God is moving in and through it and is inviting us to stay close to Him. Because here is the truth that we all need to remember is when we receive God's wisdom and challenge and nudges and truth, we respond because our job is to stay close. His job is to change us. And are you allowing Him to change your heart? I believe that there are people in this room who have been struggling with this idea, is God close? Wondering, does He see me? Does He love me this way? My invitation to you this week is to place yourself in a posture for 5 minutes where you can begin to hear from Him. Maybe for you, it is a song that you just listen to and you ask God, is this true? Do you love me this way? Go to the classics of Amazing Grace and go, God, is this how loving you are? Place yourself. Because I don't know about you, but it's tiring when we find ourselves running from God and longing for transformation, and yet we've been depending on ourselves the whole time. And God is just calmly, lovingly, graciously inviting us back to Him and said, would you place yourself in my presence and receive all that I have? Our job is to stay close. His job is to transform us. So I want to invite you this week to pray something with me. Maybe you don't have that spiritual discipline in your life. Maybe for some of you, you're going to go out and buy that Richard Foster book. It is one of my favorites. It is a classic. It transformed my life 20 years ago, and I continue to read it on a regular basis. But here, I want to give you one discipline to consider this week. As you consider, what is your hammock? Where are you going to place yourself? Here's one prayer I want to offer you that you can pray every single day as you decide to put on your clothes for the day. And it's simple as this. And you can take a picture of it if you want. I'll post it later on our Facebook group, but here is as simple as it is. Lord, as I put on these clothes on my physical body, would you clothe my spirit with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, forgiveness, and above all, love. What would happen if this week you prayed that every single day, that you would place yourself in that moment to hear from God? God, would you do this? Would I depend on you today instead of myself for these things? And we place ourselves in His presence and we see what He does. I wholeheartedly believe that God will meet you right there. In the middle of your questions, in the middle of your concerns, He will meet you in that moment and give you vision for the transformation that He desires for you and through you.
came to the world you created, trading your crown for the cross. You willingly died, your innocent life paid the cost. Counting your status as nothing, the King of all kings came to serve, washing my feet, covering me with your love. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. Let's sing this out as our prayer this morning. If you feel comfortable to stand, please do. You are my life and my treasure, the one that I can't live without. Here at your feet, my desires and dreams I lay down. Here at your feet, my desires and dreams I lay down. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take some fun, right? I give you glory for all you brought me through. And now I'm ready for whatever you want to do. I'm moving forward to follow after you. And now I'm ready for whatever you want to do. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. Every season, your grace has been enough, and I'm believing the best is yet to come. The cross before me, my hope on things above, and in you, Jesus, the best is yet to come. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. Let's sing your presence one more time. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before.
So, how will we go into our day? Will we, in this season, in this next week, would we lean into God's presence, that open door, and experience all that he has for us? I believe that as a community, when we do that, not only will we experience transformation, we will bring transformation into our homes, into our neighborhoods, into our workplaces, into this city, and we get to be a part of that. That is the vision that God gives us. So my hope for you is that you walk out challenged to step foot into God's presence more and more this week. Use that prayer, and my hope is that that is an encouragement to you. Today, after the service, we'd love to connect with you outside. If you're new or you're looking for next steps or you have questions, stop by the hub, meet our team over there. And next week, we're going to finish this series, Summer Fashion, and my good friend, Dr. Eric Moore, is going to be here with us. So excited for him. Yeah, you can give that a big round of applause. He's incredible. But we were talking this past week and just laughing and talking about what's coming next week. So make sure you stop by outside, hang out, grab some treats, connect with somebody, and I will see you out there. God bless you, and have a great week.